What we have here is a Rotax 912 UL 80 horse engine. Now that we've got the belly pan back in place, take the top cowl off here and have a look around. These are a cam lock type fastener. You can see the slot with the cam and the nose of the fastener. Up at the front we have a pin. All the fasteners are removed, and I don't know whether I can do this one-handed or not. Oh yeah, no problem. What we have here is a Rotax 912 UL 80 horse engine. We've got a carb heat log style manifold, runs across, feeds dual carburetors, ignition. This has an integrated gearbox. For those that aren't familiar with the Rotax engines, at least, this is new information. And we've got air-cooled cylinders. You can see there's cooling fins on the cylinders down here. At least I hope you can see down there. And liquid-cooled cylinder heads. These tubes here are actually go up to it's kind of a spider setup at the top, a tank here that has a conventional radiator at the front of the plane. And a lot of people with aircraft don't like the idea of the liquid cooling system on the Rotax. However, the advantage to the liquid cooling is most of the size in a strictly air-cooled aircraft engine is on the cylinder head, getting the heat out of the combustion chamber. When you're dealing with the Rotax engine and the liquid cooling, you're able to have much smaller cylinder heads and therefore have much smaller engine. Up here we have the fuel pump on the side of the gearbox. 3-bladed warp drive propeller, has given me years of good service. Back here on the Firewall we've got a voltage regulator, filter capacitor. This engine is fairly high revving. Cruise speed is about 5,200 RPM, whereas if you compare that to a conventional aircraft engine, then their cruise speed is usually in the 1,800 to 2,000 RPM range. But that's the mechanical advantage of the gearbox. We have Bing carburetors. They're similar to a Mikuni motorcycle carburetor, but Mikuni absolutely forbade Rotax from putting their carburetors on aircraft engines, so we end up with Bings. And they're reliable carburetors, they work quite well. One issue with this engine is it's almost kind of two-cylinder engines that are joined together by a common crankshaft, and we've got a balance tube that runs across the top to balance out intake pulses. And one of the things that you have to do every year at annual is you've got to split this balance tube, and then you've got to balance the carburetors. You put a vacuum gauge on one carburetor on the other end of the balance tube that attaches to the other carburetor. Then we go in and adjust linkages so that both are pulling the same amount of vacuum at varying speeds. I've got a arm here, comes across, that pulls equally on both carburetors. This plane does have dual throttle controls. However, I don't have the friction installed on the passenger side one because I never use it for anything. Up here we see a couple of bolts. Now you might think those are fairly small bolts for an engine mount, but they are what's called out, and you'll notice that that is a lock nut, but it's an all metal lock nut as opposed to being a nylock. In Canadian Homebuilt standards, you're not allowed to use nylock nuts Firewall forward. They've got to be an all metal lock nut. I don't see anything that is causing me any major concern. I could use a little bit more coolant, but I kind of knew that was the case. I've got a fresh bottle of Dex Cool, which is what we use in this engine. We'll fill it up to kind of this level here. Another difference between this style of engine or aircraft engine and a automotive engine, it's difficult to see because of the light, but there's 2 spark plugs per cylinder. Up on the top here you can see we've got 1, and opposite down on the bottom, coming up from the bottom of the cylinder, is a second spark plug. And there's 2 ignition modules here, 1, 2, that feed independent coils, and so you're able to turn off either one ignition or the other. And what that does is it turns off one plug per cylinder for test run up so that you verify. The idea being that you don't want to have too great of a drop when you switch over to one ignition, because that would mean that you would have a dead spark plug. The Rotax engine is also a dry sump engine, and here's my oil tank with a sticky cap. Also, because it's a dry sump engine, the oil level on the dipstick is not necessarily completely accurate. And I don't know whether it's showing up for you guys or not. Yeah, bring my thumb down here, we're showing that the oil is at that level. It should be at that level. However, because this is a dry sump engine, there's probably still oil in the bottom of the crankcase that needs to get forced back to the tank. Before I do the run-up on this, I'll definitely make sure to hand spin or hand bomb the prop through several rotations. And with the cap off here, you'll actually hear the engine kind of fart or burp as it forces oil back into the tank. Not something I can easily do where the aircraft is sitting right now. And as I say, we don't want to be opening the hangar door as it's kind of nasty out there this evening. You might notice that we've got a power plug here. And how come we've got an AC power plug on a 12-volt aircraft? And the answer to that is that I do have a Tannis preheat system. You can see some of these wires. There's a preheat pad on the oil tank, and each of the cylinders has a bolt that's been replaced with a heater, and that allows me to put some heat into the engine, usually plug it in and let it run for, or let the preheat run for an hour or so before trying to fly the plane in colder weather. I found that this engine starts great. Anything, we'll say 32 Fahrenheit, 0 Celsius, in that range, plus or minus a little bit. Well, plus definitely, but minus a little bit. The engine has no problem starting in colder weather with the carburetors and the way the system is set up. And quite honestly, do I really want to be flying when it's 20 below? Not really. It's just hard on stuff. These engines are designed for positive temperatures, and flying when it's too cold just damages things, and we don't need to cause any excess damage. Up here, I don't know if you guys can see it, there's the oil filter. The oil pump is in behind there, and the exhaust is running crossways underneath the engine. Drip trays under the carburetors. These are drained away from the hot exhaust so that if you end up with a stuck float that's overflowing fuel, it just runs it out the belly of the airplane. I'm not really seeing anything here that is too concerning. I think we can dump a little bit of Dexcool in there and call this ready to test run. Now we just need the weather to cooperate so we can do it. Commercial flying, you're a lot more tolerant to bad weather than for private flying like this. And my point of view is, if it's when you're flying for fun, why would you go flying when it's not going to be fun? And I can guarantee you right now, flying out there would not be fun this evening. I think we're going to end this part of it here. I'll bring you guys back when I'm ready to do the run-up and fill up that jug over there, the coolant reservoir. And maybe if we get lucky, we'll be able to take this thing for a flight before it's time for me to post this video.